so much of my focus is getting out of the rat race. And let me tell you, being paycheck to paycheck, having zero savings, zero retirement, that's essentially where I'm at now, trying to find more money, trying to move up in life. Trim carpentry always appealed to me. I like that the most. Most of my work had been like $20 an hour work. I look forward to is being able to buy back my time so that I can build my own projects. Things are nicer when you don't struggle for money. Am I going to put gas in my truck or am I going to put food in my belly? I got really big into Bitcoin, trying to figure out how to become an investor and how to become a day trader. Because when you're stuck choosing between gas and food, it's no place to live. Instead of working for a business, my own business, making barely any money. Probably had somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 different jobs over the years. I learned that the one-man band is not going to get you rich, and that's my goal. Get a job that pays better. Not an easy thing to do. It didn't last long. I just knew, I could really tell that it was a go-nowhere job. Got stuck trading dollars for hours, going to get rich. Well, after the divorce, I got stuck. Huge loss of confidence. It really impacted my pay. It's been hard rut to get out of, going to get rich. A $12 an hour job working for a master cabinet maker because I wanted to learn how to build cabinets. Did a 2-year apprenticeship. I'm not going to say it was a big mistake. Basically, I kept bouncing back between carpentry and woodworking. The construction industry is really filled with a lot of negative type people, alcoholics, drugs, smoking weed, and a skill that I utilized for many years. Like, weed is everywhere. Starting my own business again, this time for the second time, and this time it took off. I still haven't crawled out of that rat race. Fortunately, my marriage fell apart. I ended up leaving the business, and then I started working for other people again. Today, I'm going to talk about my job history. I was doing helicopter training. My goal in life at that point was to become a helicopter pilot. I worked on my own business for 7 years. What's up? I'm using the gimbal today. This is more of a free-form video. When I was 12 years old, I wanted to get a job detasseling corn. I saw a flyer at school. Got people coming. I get nervous talking around people. Hello. Whoa. Somebody's shooting the guns. And I asked my mom about it, and she thought that was a bad idea because I had really bad allergies and asthma as a kid. So instead, she got me a job with her first husband doing carpentry. That summer, I worked doing carpentry all summer long, and from that summer on, every single summer I worked doing carpentry. Just as easy as that. I kind of fell into it. It wasn't necessarily a choice of mine. It's just kind of the way things happened. When I was a senior in high school, I got a job at an ice cream shop that had just opened in the small town where I grew up. I was a short order cook and ice cream server. And then after high school, I got a job at an egg farm packaging eggs. Had another short-term temp job making the green grass seed that they spray on the side of roads after they do construction to make the grass grow. After that, I got a job manufacturing car parts at an automotive place. There was a lot of jobs I had for a short period of time. They just were not the right fit. It was very obvious right away that it's not something I wanted to do long term, so I got out of there ASAP. And then I started doing carpentry for other builders other than my dad, but I still was working for him. Did that for a long time. I had trade school, 2 years of trade school in high school, 3 years of wood shop in high school. The only classes that I ever got all A's in, so I knew that carpentry and woodworking was my thing. I got a job at a furniture factory building office furniture, and that was my first long-term job. It was at a company called Hayworth. They're a pretty big company, office furniture industry. There's Steelcase, Hayworth, Herman Miller, Howard Miller, and then Knoll. But since then, Steelcase was always number one. Hayworth was usually vying for the number 2 spot, and then Herman Miller, Howard Miller, Knoll, which I think is combined now, and it's like Herman Knoll. I'm not positive. Anyway, Hayworth was always like the number 2. They were pretty big. And the first year I was there, I was in the wood plant. And I was building curved D-tops and P-tops, office furniture tables with wood banding on the edges. I would have to make the wood rings that go around the edges of the table, glue them on a giant RF press, which had hydraulic pushers on the sides. So we had cauls that would fit the shape of the table, and use wood glue to press onto the edge of the table with these cauls and the hydraulic press pushers, and then you'd close the lid and bake it with RF frequency, and it would dry the glue. It was like a giant microwave, essentially. And so 2 minutes later the wood glue would be dry. And then you could take the table back out with a lift, put it on a vacuum table and trim the edge with a router. 3 different router setups would do it, and then you would get it all flushed out and put the radiuses on the corners, and then it would go to the sanding department. Sanding would clean it up and get it ready for finish. Then it would go to the finish department. They would spray it and finish it, and then the table was done. Go to packaging. I worked in the wood plant for the first year, but then that wasn't challenging enough, so there was an opening for the wood specials plant, so I got in to the wood specials plant, and I worked there for 4 years. So I was at Hayworth a total of 5 years. It's the longest job I'd had at that point, and I ended up meeting my fiance, getting married, and we moved so she could go to med school. I ended up leaving that job, and after that I went and started my own construction business. I had been in construction a long time, had a lot of building experience, but I had 0 business experience. So tried starting a business. I tried going and meeting with realtors and talking to bankers and seeing if I could get some jobs that way. I bought a big plow truck, did some subcontracting, doing some plowing jobs, and I was making pretty decent money, like $65 an hour. This was back in the early 2000s, like 2001. But the business was just, there was not enough business to sustain it. I couldn't keep up with the truck payments. I had an awesome work truck, man. I love that thing. It was a 95 GMC 3500. It had the 6.5 turbo diesel. It had an 11-foot utility bed. It was a dually, and it had a 9-foot 2-inch Boss V-plow on the front. The thing was a tank. It was humongous. The business that I was subcontracting for, Lansing Lawn and Snow, they put me on the giant lots at like Walmart parking lots because my truck was such a tank. The thing was humongous and ridiculous. It was awesome. A lot of fun. After plowing for like 12 hours straight, though, the whole side of your leg and your butt would go numb, and you'd get out and you wouldn't even be able to walk. So I learned that plowing is not what I want to do for my life career. And the construction jobs didn't come flowing in fast enough, so I ended up selling the truck and getting another factory job. I got a UAW factory job for a company called American Specialty Cars. They were building the Chevy SSR convertible pickup truck, and I started on the tire and wheel line, and then after a little while I got transferred to the engine line. And that job was pretty cool. They had the Corvette motor in that car, so we would get a motor, transmission, marry them together on these digital carts that would automatically move every 6 minutes. You had 6 minutes to do your job at your station. There's like 7 stations. I got to use these really cool digital torque wrenches that would automatically know how many fasteners you needed to do at that torque. And once you change the socket in the digital socket tray, it would automatically program the gun for how many more bolts you needed to do of that for that socket of that spec, different torque spec, different number of fasteners. I worked there for a few years until they closed down that line. They weren't selling enough of those trucks, so they ended up discontinuing it. After that, I went back into carpentry, and I was working for some different builders, kind of bouncing around, trying to find some good companies to work for, and I ended up finding a really awesome company to work for. It was called Custom Built Decks and Finished Basements, and that's where I learned how to do decks. That ended up being a big part of my life, and a skill that I utilized for many years after that. This was like 2004, 2005, somewhere in there. So I worked with them for a while. My wife at the time got done with med school, and we went back to Grand Rapids, to Jenison area. It was during the internships phase, so I had this job in Lansing, but we moved to Jenison, and I was essentially trim carpentry always appealed to me. I like that the most. My hand's getting cold. I'm gonna have to put a glove on. What I loved about finished basements is that you got to work inside in the wintertime, because I didn't like being out in the cold necessarily. I commuted from Jenison to Lansing, which was an hour and 20 minutes one way. I did that for 2 years, and this was around the same time I was doing helicopter training. My goal in life at that point was to become a helicopter pilot, and I had been doing my training at Lowell. It's hard to use this thing with gloves on now, of course, which is why I didn't want to put my gloves on in the first place. But my goal is to become a helicopter pilot, And I got as far as I could with that before my daughter was born in 2004. Then it come time for my wife to do her residency. We had to move. The place we ended up moving for that was Cincinnati. Ended up starting my own business again in Cincinnati. This time for the second time, and this time it took off. I built my own website. I was buying leads from a company called Service Magic, which later became Home Advisor, I believe. I specialized in trim carpentry, cabinet installations, and custom decks, composite decks, like Trex specifically. I worked on my own business for 7 years, 2007 till 2013. I stayed busy the whole time. I wasn't killing it. I was a solopreneur, just doing it myself. I was also Mr. Dad a little bit, you know. My wife was going to med school a lot. I ran the kids to and from school and daycare. And I only worked like 10 to 2. 5 hours a day. I wasn't really working that hard. I wasn't really making that great of money, but I was set my own schedule. I got to pick the jobs I wanted to take, did my own thing, and that's what I enjoyed the most. You know, being a carpenter, having these skills and knowing how to build. You always end up building other people's projects. What I look forward to is being able to buy back my time so that I can build my own projects. It seemed like I was always working on other people's stuff. I did that for 7 years. Fortunately, my marriage fell apart. I ended up leaving the business and coming back to Michigan, where I was from, where I wanted to be. I didn't really want to be in Ohio. And then I started working for other people again. My confidence was shot. I took a $12 an hour job working for a master cabinet maker because I wanted to learn how to build cabinets and furniture. So I did a 2-year apprenticeship. And before that, most of my work had been like $20 an hour work. The whole time I was at Custom Built Decks, I was making around 20 bucks an hour. When I moved to Jenison, I couldn't find a job doing trim carpentry that paid more than $12 an hour. So that's why I made the commute so far, so long. And when I got to Cincinnati, I was bidding the jobs and doing them per job. And that was pretty good. But essentially, I ended up subbing for another guy and working for him mainly for 20 bucks an hour. So I was really stuck at $20 an hour for quite a long time. After working for the cabinet shop and learning how to build custom cabinets, I took a few other woodworking jobs. Worked for another woodworking factory. I was making barely any money, like 16 bucks an hour or something. It didn't last long. I just knew, I could really tell that it was a go-nowhere job. I wrote it out for as long as I could, and basically I kept bouncing back between carpentry and woodworking, trying to find more money, move up in life, you know, get a job that pays better. Not an easy thing to do. You amass all these years of skills, but then at some point you just feel like you're not really putting those skills to use. And you're definitely not getting compensated for those skills. But so after the divorce, I went through quite a huge loss of confidence, and it really impacted my pay, because I started, instead of working for a business, my own business, and bidding the jobs and setting the rate of how much I'm going to get paid to do a job, I went back to working for other people, trading dollars for hours. And that, I'm not going to say it was a big mistake, but because I was doing it to gain skills, because I wanted to learn cabinet making, but I got stuck back in that loop of working, trading dollars for hours. And really, if you're trying to be an entrepreneur and you're trying to get ahead in life, that's no good, because it's not, you're going to be spinning your wheels without a plan. I kept bouncing around, going from carpentry to woodworking. Worked for a few different builders over the years. Probably had somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 different jobs over the years. So I've got to work with a lot of different people, and you know, the construction industry is really filled with a lot of negative type people in my experience. It's got a lot of alcoholics, you know, of course, drugs, smoking weed. You know, that was a big part of my life for quite a while. So at the time, I didn't really care so much. It didn't bother me. But it seems like weed is everywhere in construction. Like, if you want to find workers, that's something, you know, a lot of the companies didn't really drug test for weed because they wouldn't have any more workers if they did. It seems like, anyway. There's always exceptions, but So that's kind of where I've been. Is I got stuck not being an entrepreneur. I got stuck trading dollars for hours. It's been a hard rut to get out of. One of the things that I realized is that without being able to scale your business, you're going to always be capped at a certain point. You can make $20 an hour, or you can make $40 an hour, or you can make $60 an hour, but there's only still 40 hours in the week, or 50. You know, you can grind and work more, but at the end of the day, that number is finite. You can only go so far with it. So really, at some point, you got to figure out how to run a business where you have crews and you have multiple sets of people doing the same type work, but you're able to essentially clone yourself and duplicate yourself in order to be able to multiply that number of 40 hours that you can get paid for. I learned that the one-man band of trying to wear all the hats and do everything is not going to get you rich. And that's my goal, is I'm going to get rich. I'm going to one day own a helicopter, because how dumb is it to know how to fly a helicopter but never be able to own one and use it for a business, you know? Like, how useless to have a skill that you never put into use. I grew up poor in a single wide trailer for the first 17 years of my life. I know what being poor is like, and I know that that's not how I want to live for my entire life. You know, once you've done it and you know about it, you know that, you know, there's better ways to live, for sure. So I've decided I'm going to do whatever it takes to figure out how to be rich, because I want to see how the other half live. You know, I was married to a doctor for a while, doctor in med school and training, and I got to visit a lot of houses owned by doctors and meet a lot of people that were on the other side of the track, so to speak. Things are nicer when you don't struggle for money, and when you don't have to struggle and decide between, what am I going to buy? Am I going to put gas in my truck, or am I going to put food in my belly? Because when you're stuck choosing between gas and food, it's no place to live. And let me tell you, being paycheck to paycheck, having zero savings, zero retirement, that's essentially where I'm at now. You know, like, I still haven't crawled out of that rat race. That's why so much of my focus is getting out of the rat race and trying to figure out how to become an investor and how to become a day trader. Like, I studied that for the last 3 years. I got really big into Bitcoin and learning how to day trade and invest in crypto. Downside is that I'm only trading with $200 or $300 in my account, and to learn how to day trade effectively, you need to have like 10 grand in your account, ideally 100 grand. I've learned the skill of trading, but I don't have the money to put into it. So I've done more research, and I've come across YouTube, and I had no idea how much money you can actually make off YouTube. It's just insane. It's ridiculous. You can make $40,000 off one video. You could make $10,000 off one video, and then everything is cumulative. There's different routes to go about it, of course. And at first I was really like, holy cow, AdSense is so awesome. But then the more you learn about it, you realize AdSense really isn't that great. You need to have other things to go along with that, like selling courses or programs.